Welcome, everyone, to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling. With me again is my friend Jeff Whitcher from Jeff Whitcher's Vinyl Destination. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, how are you, Tim?
Good, good. And I'm looking forward to this episode because a few weeks ago, Mike Ladano and I did an episode on rare CDs. Got a lot of response to that one. So I thought we would do one on rare cassettes. And not a lot of folks I know actually still collect cassettes like I do, but I know you do. So I asked Jeff if he was interested in doing a rare cassettes episode. He went for it. So I'm really curious to see what he's got. Basically, there weren't any rules. I just wanted to go through my tape collection and find what are some really, really early pressings of some of these cassettes. And some of them look really different than reissues. And It just so happened I didn't go beyond 1983 because I wanted these to be really, really old looking tapes. So I guess we'll start with, for no other reason, we've decided to kind of more or less group these by record label. And it's also going to be cool because I think a lot of mine are going to be Canadian and a lot of Jeff's will probably be American. Not necessarily always like that. So we'll get started with, what is now known as Sony, but what used to be known as CBS. So Epic and Columbia and labels like that. What have you got on CBS for old cassettes, Jeff?
All right, so I'm going to start with what I think is the earliest. I don't know if we call them pressings or what we call them. I never know how to refer to, the different pressings of cassettes or whatever.
Issues, I get. I guess you could say issues.
Yeah. So this is, I think, the earliest Sony issues, CBS issues that I have, and this is these are Aerosmith's first two albums. This is their first one. They're self-titled, and that's what it looks like on the spine, if it were, and then the cassette itself, and then the tracks are listed on the back of the cassette like that. And there's nothing in the J card at all. It's just completely blank. And then I've also got Get Your Wings. And the exact same thing. I mean, this cassette shell should look familiar to anybody who has a CBS tape. And then there's nothing by way of J card there.
And what's interesting about those, Jeff, is that you've already demonstrated like two different issues because some of them, and I've had tapes like this too, will list 5 of the tracks that are on the album, no more, no less, always 5. And then some will have a barcode in the same place. I don't know which one of those is older.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I tend to think this one is because it doesn't have the barcode, and I think if it had a barcode, it would have been a later issue. Yeah. This is another one that's got, like you say, the 5 tracks on here. This is Elvis Costello's debut album, and then you've got the classic. I forget what the name of the font is that they use.
Impact.
Impact. Yeah.
You can do a pretty good job at replicating that. Just to select red and impact font, and there it is. And also, I'm pretty sure I've seen issues of those Aerosmith tapes with the impact font and not the little tiny print.
Right. Well, and they moved to, this was, it was a smaller font that they used, I think, in like the 70s. And then in the 80s, they got the larger font there, which any tape, I think, after, I don't know, like 82 or something like that.
I think so. I think
the
so.
larger font. But the thing that's kind of frustrating is they never have, at least none of my early CBS cassettes have anything in the J card. There's no credits, there's no lyrics, there's no anything at all.
That's one of the reasons I loved, because I bought cassettes exclusively, but you'll probably find the same thing. When I first started finding a few vinyl records, especially of 70s albums, and they had lyrics and credits and pictures, like inner gatefold stuff, like it's really, really cool. But the cassettes, there's nostalgia for them. You're paying for the portability.
Yeah, exactly. And this was, I did collect a little bit of vinyl when I was growing up, but, by and large, I was coming of age when it was all cassettes, and they were convenient and they were portable, and you could carry a bunch of them to one place, so that made it a little easier. I'm gonna go through a couple of Pink Floyd CBS cassettes that I have, and this is interesting because the cover is different from what was on the vinyl. This is "Wish You Were Here."
I knew when you said the cover was different, I knew it would be that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I like this one. I almost wish they would have gone with this cover. Not that I don't like the original one where you've got the man on fire and he's shaking hands with the other guy, the Hypnosis cover. But, I like this robotic handshaking one as well. And this was actually, I think the sticker that came, because originally the album came in black cellophane, and they had this sticker on it, which designated, that it was Pink Floyd and it was their album. Otherwise, you would have had no way of knowing. It's kind of almost like In Through the Outdoor, except at least In Through the Outdoor had a stamp on it, so you knew, who the artist was in that. So there's that one.
Again, it's Hypnosis, right? Very typical of Hypnosis. Not a lot of text. Sometimes no text.
Exactly. And then this is Pink Floyd Animals. And what's interesting about this one, and this is the only cassette that I have that does this, is there's a song, and I think it's because all these songs are, like over 7 minutes long, but at the end of side one, they have the beginning of Pigs, 3 different ones, and then it fades out. And then on side 2, the rest of the song fades in, and you get the rest of the song. It's almost like an 8-track that way. This is the only cassette that I have like that.
Yeah.
But again, nothing at all in credits until, and this was, considering this came out in 1979, this is The Wall, and it's actually, you don't have the impact font on here. You've actually got the customized label there, and there's actually song titles, no lyrics, but you get what you got in the gatefold on The Wall, which is, pretty cool. And then they did the same thing for their next album, which came out in, I believe this was 1982 or 83, The Final Cut, which also had a customized, label on there. And then you got a little bit of credits, and again, what was in the gatefold.
Yeah, probably the bigger bands insisted on that. I remember the first time that I saw an old CBS US cassette like that was a little customized was REO Speedwagon Good Trouble from '82. It's all blue on the side and blue on the front, and it's got credits inside of it, which is not at all what we're used to seeing. I know that my Aerosmith Draw the Line is a US one. That's the first one to have any credits inside of it. Doesn't have lyrics, but then again, the original record didn't have lyrics anyway.
Right. And then I've got, this is unique. This is Elvis Costello again. This is his album, Armed Forces. It's really Elvis Costello and the Attractions, but for whatever reason, they didn't put "and the Attractions." But this, looks like the other CBS cassettes that I've shown, but on this one, they've actually got in the J card his first 2 albums that if you're interested in buying. I don't have any other CBS cassette that does that shows, other albums from that artist. So, so anyway, those are my rare or what have you. Yeah.
So I've certainly had a lot of those. I've still got a lot of those. I pulled out the Canadian ones because I figured you'd bring the US ones. So in Canada, the CBS cassettes and the 8-tracks went with this sort of beige theme. So this is the debut Toto album, and so on the side, it's just very, very plain looking, right? It's not at a certain point the coloring in red. You'll see when that happens, and they look like this on the back. I'll take it out of the J card actually, because get some glare. So yeah, so it's very much very familiar to people that bought cassettes in the 70s, a lot of these CBS ones. And this one's actually a pretty old issue because this is what the cassette looks like. So it's actually got a sticker on it and not just the song titles printed on it. So that's a pretty early one. The next one I've got, take it out of the thing here. It's actually the same idea. Is same year, Heart, Dog, and Butterfly. Actually says one side of this program is of longer duration than the other to preserve the album continuity. Again, like you said, not unlike an 8-track, something you'd see on there. So yeah, very plain, but very distinctive. And like the Toto one, same idea with the cassette itself. So the Toto one's Columbia. This Heart one is on Portrait. I don't know how well that shows up. Next one's kind of cool because I don't have a lot of soundtracks. I haven't got a lot of soundtracks, but I actually did an episode on all of these. This is the soundtrack to Star Trek: The Motion Picture from 1979. Cool cover, but still the same CBS look. And this is more typical of what the cassettes looked like, sort of beige color and the font that they used. This one's actually very beige. Like, I don't know if this one was left in the sun or what. This is the next one is the first one where there's actually a little bit of customization going on. This is Kansas 2 for the Show, their live album from 78. So they've actually got, now it's not the Kansas logo. I don't know where they got this calligraphy written logo, but it's different. And that's the Kirshner, of course, the Kirshner Records logo, very distinctive. And again, 78, I seem to have a few of these that look like this, which is kind of cool. Next up, a band that I've been talking about a lot lately. And not the easiest cassette to find, not the easiest album to find. This is Journey in the Beginning, compilation of their early stuff from 79. That's what it looks like on the side and the back. And this one is like that Star Trek one, but it's much lighter in color. So these things will like morph over time. And so far, these are kind of all looking about the same. I'm going to be getting into some different looking ones here in a bit. So now, okay, well, here's one from the 80s. Here's the first Loverboy album. And again, the cassette looks about the same.
Now in America, that would have had, what, a smaller, like, red on the label?
It would have had the Impact font on it by 1980, yeah. Because I used to have a copy that looked like that. There's Cheap Trick, Dream Police. Again, nothing different looking about the cassette. I guess I'll just skip to see if I can find some ones that are really different. But here's one with some true customization. I can't take it out because it's sealed, but this is Kansas Monolith from 79. This is actually still sealed, and they actually did use the actual Kansas logo on that one. So, so a band you already talked about, that's Aerosmith, Night in the Ruts. And so now, as we enter, so around 82, like you said, it's when in the U.S. because that's when the font started getting bigger. It got bigger in Canada as well, and they started to color them in red to make them look a little bit more like the U.S. ones. Still quite different though. This is Aldo Nova, Subject Aldo Nova from 83. So as you can see here, it's in red.
That almost looks like the font they use for PolyGram.
Yeah, it does. I never noticed. And this is on Portrait, of course, like the Heart was. So there's that, and the same it goes for the cassette itself, bigger print. Another one, I don't know what it is about Kansas, but another one with a customized font, but it's not the band's logo. This is Drastic Measures from 83. Of course, they didn't even use their logo on that cover. So I don't know where they got this logo from. But
yeah, they like putting a different logo on every single release, it looks like.
And also these ones had the CBS and see if I can hold up to the light, and a maple leaf on here. So there's CBS cassettes from Canada. I've got one more to show you on CBS. This one has puzzled me from the first time I found one of these in the early 90s. And it still puzzles me to this very day. And I've never heard anyone explain why this is. This is Night Ranger, Midnight Madness. This is a Canadian cassette. By now, sometime in 83, they switched from the beige color to just white, and then having this chromium dioxide down, because that's when they started promoting, improved sound quality. And, some people look at this, oh, yeah, yeah, okay. But if you really know much about Night Ranger, you're like, wait a second. I thought they were on MCA.
I was just about to say that. I'm like, they're not a CBS band.
In Canada, when this first came out, because their first album, Dawn Patrol, we'll discuss that in a bit, came out on Boardwalk Records. Boardwalk Records went bankrupt. And I guess the bands that were on them fell on different labels, if at all. But in Canada, Midnight Madness was picked up by Epic, CBS, because my vinyl of Midnight Madness is also on Epic. I have no idea. Eventually, and I've also seen Canadian cassettes of this on MCA as a reissue. So this obviously didn't last, but the first time I saw this, I was like, what? It doesn't make any sense. So this is what they became to look like, with the white on the side, and they stayed like this for a long, long time until towards the end of the 80s, and the CDs were like this too. They became, the U.S. and Canadian cassettes and CDs began to look more and more alike, to the point where, unless one was and one wasn't, the only way you could tell where it was from is to read the address of the record label on it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so those are just some curiosities and some very distinctive looking cassettes. So that's CBS. The next label I have in a pile is, you already mentioned them, PolyGram, so Mercury, those associated labels. If you've got those arranged, I'm curious to see what you have.
It's just a question of finding the right pile. Okay. So we talking Mercury as well?
Yep.
The PolyGram. Okay. So this is Rainbow. This is,
I literally just got that CD the other day.
oh, okay. Yeah, this is on the Mercury label, PolyGram Records. It's got both logos there for that. This is obviously the Bent Out of Shape album. There's a tiny little window there. You can barely see how much tape is there. And then some credits here, but not a whole lot. And got PolyGram on the actual shell itself. And then another Rainbow album. This is Straight Between the Eyes. And a bigger font that they're using now on the spine. And a bigger window on the actual cassette. But nothing, no credits.
Still no credit. Now, see, it's funny because I used to have that on cassette, the Straight Between the Eyes, and it looked exactly like your Bent Out of Shape.
Okay.
Except that the front was the same, but everything else, it had the smaller font on the side and it had the smaller window in it too.
Okay.
I've got a few of those beige colored Mercury cassettes too. I'm wondering if we're going to have some of the same.
Yeah, I have a feeling. And then this is, I'm a big Beatles fan, and I've got what I think is a Canadian version of this album and an American version. This album was released after John Lennon's death. This is Milk and Honey.
Okay.
And the fronts look the same, however.
Yeah, that's definitely a Canadian, because it's got the QC10 on the side of it, and that's a trademark of Canadian PolyGram. And a friend of mine, Brent Underhill, he used to joke he'd write his name inside those Canadian ones, because if you open it up, it says quality has a name. So he'd sign his name next to it.
That's funny. Well, what's cool about this one is that this is the only cassette I've ever seen this. It comes with a booklet, like a booklet separate from the J card. And
okay, yeah, that is different.
The lyrics.
Also, that's the only one that was on PolyGram, wasn't it? Because when it was reissued on Capitol, I think. So
yeah, because
it's kind of odd because, I mean, yeah, the last one was on Geffen, and
it was, yeah. And so this and his like greatest hits, it was called the John Lennon Collection. That was back on Geffen, so he was only on Polydor for one album. And then, are we showing Rush also as part of this?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think this is the oldest Rush cassette that I have. This is All the World's a Stage.
Yeah, cool.
And kind of a very yellowed.
Yeah. I've never seen that exact one of All the World's a Stage before. I've got some that look like that a little bit, but that's cool. And also that has, oh yes, that has other Mercury albums available inside of it, right?
Right. Yep. So you got albums like The Runaways, um, Spirit, Farther Along, Mike Green, Bachman Turner Overdrive. Some of these bands I've never even heard of. Charles Erland, the Dells, Jailbreak Thin Lizzy
Yeah.
is also listed on there. And then this is
Farewell to Kings, yeah.
obviously A Farewell to Kings, and then another cassette window that's
Very small,
very
yeah.
narrow. But also, again, you've got other albums that you might want from Mercury. And then this is just, this is actually credits, a long list of credits.
And that's interesting because not even the Canadian cassette, which was on Anthem Records, had any credits in it.
Yeah, so I guess it's just when they upgraded to the next pressing or whatever you have of this, they stopped printing the credits for whatever reason. So,
Well, yeah, they would stop printing the credit. I suppose it's cheaper, right? They could sell them cheaper.
yeah,
More
exactly.
budget line.
Yeah. So that's my Polydor Mercury.
Okay. So I've got a really old one here, and this is actually a Canadian Columbia House issue. It wasn't distributed by PolyGram initially, but it ended up being that way. This is Kiss Unmasked. And I don't know if you can see that. There's a really old, like, typewritten font. And that really takes me back because I remember seeing a lot of cassettes that looked like that. So it's customized as far as having the logo on it and the Casablanca logo. But Columbia House cassettes were basically very generic looking. Now, the cassette that originally came with this deteriorated. It literally fell apart. So I found a later issue on Mercury just to have a cassette to go inside of it. Obviously, this isn't the same one because this would have had a totally different looking J card. Right back into Rush though. Got a really old one here. First album. And I like how it actually says up here, only Mercury Tapes did this, a complete album. I don't know why they thought it would be very small there. A different look there. And they had these colored cassettes with PDI sort of emblazoned in here or sunk in. PolyGram Distribution Inc. or something. I don't know exactly what that stood for, but that's the cassette. Very old again. The tiny little window, like you said, and some other Mercury albums available. And this is one of those stupid ones that folds out, and there's nothing in it except, where to send your defective tapes. And I got another one that's really interesting. This is something that was never released in North America. This is called Rush Through Time. This originally came out in 1978, I think, in the Netherlands, just as a picture disc, but then it was reissued just as a regular record, which is the one I have. But I actually found one on cassette. It's on Mercury. So this is actually made in West Germany. And it's kind of a cool live shot of the band on stage. It's using the Hemispheres logo because they never really had a set logo. There's nothing different there's nothing rare on here. It's all songs from, there's nothing from the first album, but it's all songs from between Fly By Night and A Farewell to Kings. But it's kind of cool. It came out. I don't even know. I don't even know if it's on. It might be on 8-track. I have no idea. So another label that eventually came under the PolyGram banner was London Records. And London Records famously went, in 1978, they kind of went out of business as far as popular music, and they just did classical. But so if you've got old records from the Rolling Stones where they were on Decca, well, that was kind of like London. It's a very, very old record label. But one of the bands that was a victim of their switch over to just, classical music, and they'd only had 2 albums at this point, was Yesterday and Today, also course. And these are 2 of the rarest cassettes I own. So they've got this blue, they're in this blue case. The 8 tracks are like this too. The cassette itself, you talk about a small window. And there's nothing inside of it. And then it's black on the side here with just the name of the band. But then for the second album, Struck Down, it's white with black lettering, but most everything else is the same. It's the blue case and the blue cassette, a little bit bigger on the window for this one. I've seen this one on eBay a few times. This one, this is the only copy I've ever seen for sale, is the one that I snatched up. Generally their stuff tends to run rare anyway. Next one is a label called RSO. Now, a lot of people, that was the Bee Gees label, that was Clapton's label. The Grease soundtrack was on RSO. This is the only thing I have on the RSO label. Soundtrack to The Empire Strikes Back. And I found this for $1 somewhere. I was like, oh, I can't resist. I got to buy this.
Probably the only album worth owning on the RSO label, truth be told. But
unless it's got the other two. It might have the other two in the trilogy, but it's got a cool picture like Darth Vader's helmet and just looks like that on the side. RSO had a pig for a logo for some reason. RS stood for Robert Stigwood. And this is what it looked like on the side. Not exactly a screaming rock label. Another one I've got that's kind of similar to your All the World's a Stage, a band that never really broke worldwide, so it's kind of rare to find cassettes of theirs outside of Canada, is Max Webster. This is their second album, High Class and Borrowed Shoes, a U.S. cassette on Mercury, and a really old issue of one. Yeah, very much like your All the World's a Stage. This one also has a sticker on the side of the case. I've never seen one like this before. So it's got the album title and it's got the serial number, and that's what the cassette itself looks like. So pretty rare, and it's got other Mercury albums available. I got another Kiss one here. Now this one is interesting. I was talking about this with Matt and Will and Jax, who we do a lot of shows together. In Canada, at some point, I think it was 1983. Look this up. Discogs was a big help. PolyGram in Canada put out a series of reissues called the Priceless Collection. And they did it for all of their artists. So Bee Gees, Rod Stewart, Thin Lizzy, BTO. But there's 2 albums by Kiss that they put out that look like this. They put them out on vinyl and cassette. So it says the Priceless Collection here. So this is Dynasty. This is a Canadian Dynasty tape. And I'll take it out of the, that's what the cassette looks like. So the serial number on this reissue is KS4-10. And the only other Kiss album that looks like this was Destroyer. They picked those 2 albums, probably their 2 biggest selling studio albums. And they put them out in the Priceless Collection. And the Destroyer catalog number is KS4-4. So I used to think that all the Kiss albums there was a whole series that looked like this. It was just Destroyer and Dynasty. And I don't have any of them, but it is possible to find vinyl of Destroyer and Dynasty. And diehard Kiss collectors look for these from Canada that have the Priceless Collection just over top of the artwork on the vinyl itself. Next one's an interesting one because it's not a band that you associate with PolyGram Records. And it's actually interesting to note that this band had major label distribution in Canada before the US, and they're an American group, one of the biggest. This is Metallica, Kill 'Em All. This is a Canadian issue again. There's the QC10. And this is on Bonsai Records. Bonsai was a Canadian label, it was out of Quebec, that specialized in early thrash metal. Basically stuff that would have come out on Megaforce in the States or, various labels. So bands that didn't have major label, record deals. Came out in this Bonsai in Canada. So bands like Venom and Tank and Torch and, a lot of the early thrash bands, a little bit of new wave of British heavy metal, different ones like that. So not Overkill, but Raven. Some of these bands ended up on major labels, some of them didn't. But the first 2 Metallica albums originally came out in Canada on this Bonsai, which had PolyGram distribution. So this looks very much like a PolyGram cassette because it kind of is. And like the record, it doesn't say side 1 and side 2. It says this side and that side. Kind of beat up. This is what the cassette looks like. So this and Ride the Lightning are kind of collectible as Canadian issues before they were reissued by Elektra. I actually have, so I've got this cassette and I've got the vinyl of Ride the Lightning on Bonsai Records. Next up, this is going to be very much like your rainbow cassettes that you show, so I won't spend a lot of time on them because they look the same. First two Coney Hatch albums. Again, rare to see this band albums outside of Canada. So the first album and the second one out of hand, both with the very small font on them. And, in the cream colored case. This isn't the original case this came in. I just had to put in a different one. And the same colored cassettes with the small window in them. Another Columbia House one here. Def Leppard High and Dry. This is a Canadian Columbia House issue from 1981. This is the original version that does not have Me and My Wine on it. It does have all the lyrics inside of it. Someone, I don't know, marker, there's like purple marker inside there. So the retail, like I've said with 8 tracks many times, the retail cassette of this would have looked way different. This is what the cassette itself looked like with the Mercury logo on it. This one will look familiar to you because you sent this one to me. It's another London Records album. This is ZZ Top Tejas, and this is an RCA Music Service version. So it's London, but it was a mail order one. And they all look the same no matter what the originating label is. So there's a London logo on here. It could have a Columbia logo. It could have an Atlantic logo. It's whatever label the band was on. Very generic looking. But cool. It's a very, very old one. It's definitely the oldest one that I've seen. Here's another one on London Records, and this is a band that you've been getting into. April Wine, The Whole World's Going Crazy. Now, this album has a different track listing than its Canadian counterpart. It's about half the same, half is different. There's so many various reasons for that I can't even get into. So this is a reissue, so it looks more like an 80s PolyGram tape. So it's actually, manufactured, marketed by London Records, a division of PolyGram Classics Incorporated. It's the only one I've seen that says it's on PolyGram Classics. So on the side, it kind of looks like the Y&T albums, but those ones didn't get reissued. Just a couple more here.
You talked about the London Records label, and I've actually got 2 here because you had mentioned the Rolling Stones, and they were on the London label. And then their catalog was eventually issued on Abco Records.
Yes.
But this is a very early Rolling Stones cassette on that Abco label. There's actually nothing on the back here. It's completely blank, which is
never seen one like that. That's cool.
Yeah, and then this is what the cassette itself looks like, and then this is the only other early Rolling Stones pressing that I have. This is Through the Past Darkly, which is kind of like a late 60s greatest hits.
Yeah.
Again, nothing on the back there, and that's what the spine looks like, and then there's nothing. It's a really thick J card too. It's like twice the thickness of the ones that I'm used to, but there's absolutely nothing inside. It almost looks like you could have printed this off on a computer or something. But
those are cool.
Yeah.
You held up another one. I think it might have been one of the Rush ones. It looks kind of like this. This is Thin Lizzy Fighting, and this is a U.S. RCA Music Service version, but it's not quite as generic looking as the ZZ Top one. So, of course, this is on Mercury, but it looks different because it's an RCA Music Service version. And it's the cassette itself. A good rule of thumb is if it has a sticker on it and it's not printed, it's probably older, but not necessarily. Another Max Webster one, Universal Juveniles. This is a Mercury issue. Again, very rare to see U.S. Max Webster cassettes. And one of my prized possessions, my Creatures of the Night. This is an original Canadian cassette. The last one that was on Casablanca, and this is an original Canadian one distributed by PolyGram. So yeah, that's all the Mercury, PolyGram, all of those related labels. Next up, well, why don't you pick a label, Jeff, and I'll follow your lead.
All right, well, let's go with Capitol. I know you've got some Capitol in your collection. Yep, so I'm going to start. I mean, again, I mentioned that I'm a Beatles fan, and so the first couple of ones that I'm going to show Our early Beatles cassettes. This is Meet the Beatles. And nothing in the J card, but that's what the cassette itself looks like. Beatles 6, and this has a more kind of 70s Capitol logo there that they were using. And some of these have like this little strip down here. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's very typical Capitol. They would do that a lot. So I would say that Meet the Beatles is probably the older of the two as far as issues go.
Right. And then that cassette, which looks pretty similar to the other one. This is the album that your favorite band takes its namesake from.
Yesterday and Today, yep.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, what? You don't have the original cover?
Yeah, I tried to peel off I tried to steam off the J card and see if there's something underneath it, but as it turns out, there was not.
Did they do that with, I knew they did that with some vinyl, but did they do that with cassettes too?
No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I've never seen that Butcher cover ever on a cassette. I think that's the only issue of that. And then this is Magical Mystery Tour, which, these covers look exactly like or at least for the most part, look like what the 8 tracks look like.
Yeah.
They use the same photographs, same cropped photographs for these cassettes as they did the 8-track counterparts. And I know, Tim, this is this is the band you're very fond of, Duran Duran.
Cool.
But this is this is just kind of got the plain as Capitol, but
that's a Columbia House issue.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, because it's got, if you look at the side of it, it's got the 5 in front of the serial number.
Okay.
Yeah, that marks it as a Columbia House issue, and that's the I believe that is the reissued version of that, because the original had a different cover, a slightly different cover, and also when they reissued this, they put it. What's the song? Is There Something I Should Know on it? Because that was a standalone single. Yeah.
Yeah,
so that song is weird because it's one of those. It doesn't really belong to an album because it doesn't sound anything like Girls on Film or Planet Earth. You can tell those are from different time periods.
Yeah, exactly. They just stuck it on there because they thought it would sell more records.
And I'm sure it did. It would have been the next thing to come out after Rio. So yeah, why not?
Yeah, and I forgot this one too. This is Sgt. Pepper's on Capitol.
And of course, I think because it's the Beatles, I don't think every band got that treatment of having the cover take up the entire J card. I think that's just because it was the Beatles. They might have done it with the Beach Boys too. Also, you mentioned 8 tracks there. There is a series of Capitol issues that I know a lot of people collect, and they look much like that, except instead of them being blue, they're pink.
Oh, okay.
So you'll come across those every once in a while.
And then this is also, it's not Capitol, but it is EMI. This is the British version of Sgt. Pepper. This is an import.
Ultimately, it's the same label. I mean, EMI, Parlophone, Capitol, it's all
right.
It's all the same, head company or whatever.
And all of the other Beatles cassettes that were issued on Parlophone look like this, where you just got the track listing. The thing about the Capitol cassettes, which is kind of frustrating, especially if you're a Beatles fan, is they totally mess up with the track listing.
I've heard that.
They were more concerned with having an even amount of time on each side of the cassette. So, for instance, on Abbey Road, the first 2 tracks are Come Together and I think
Something?
it's something. Well, no, actually, Here Comes the Sun and Something are the first 2 tracks on it. And then it's really, therethere's no rhyme or reason to how they ordered the track listing on any of their cassettes. But
that's certainly a bane of 8-track collectors too. So because for instance, the first one that always comes to my mind is my 8-track of Queen 2. The first song on it, on the 8-track, is The Loser in the End. And I mean, Queen 2 starts off with Procession. There's a reason they put them in.
Right.
Bands take a long time to think about the running order, and then they just mangle them They put them out on not just 8 tracks, but as we've seen, cassettes too.
Yeah. I think this is the oldest Capitol cassette that I have. This is the Beach Boys' Spirit of America.
That's cool.
And one of the reasons why I think it's the oldest is because it's got a sticker on it.
Yeah.
It's got the 70s Capitol logo.
Yeah. Yeah, they stopped using that in 78 or 79, I think.
Yeah. And then this is Endless Summer, but it's not the cover that you've seen out in the wild,
wow.
or if you happen to own it. Yeah. And this is on, it's EMI, but it's called Music for Pleasure.
Okay, that's a UK label. That's a UK reissue division.
Right. And
yeah.
so that's
the cover to Endless Summer is iconic. It's the painting and they're in the bushes or whatever, and probably one of their best known album covers.
Yeah, no, it's
and that's just
iconic.
That's just a generic photo of the band.
Right,
right. And I'm not, I don't know, but it might not even be the right, some of the guys might not even be on any of those tracks. They do that sometimes too.
Yeah, this is actually the 5, main Beach Boys, so at least they got that right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just interesting because I saw, when you're looking through cassettes, you see the spine and then you pull it out and you're like, oh, that's not what I expected to see.
Well, by the same token, I've also seen like Capitol used to put out a lot of I call them truck stop cassettes. And they're just cheapo, like compilate. That's exactly what I was going to say, because, Die Hard Beat, and I know this because of you and because of Matt, they have an album called Surf's Up.
Yeah.
But that's got nothing to do with the songs on that cassette there.
Right. Yeah, no, it really doesn't. And you know what's even funnier, Tim? So this is called Surf's Up. The cassette is called Golden Summer. Same tracks.
Yeah.
Everything. It's no idea why
just throwing them out there so that people will say, hey, I don't have this, and buy it and realize they've got everything on it.
Yeah.
And in the case of, they used to do that with Sammy Hagar, and in the case of Hagar, for the longest time, it was easier to find those than it was to find the actual albums the songs came off of. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah. So that's my Capitol collection.
Which brings us to the same guy we were just talking about. This is a Canadian, and this is rare to find a Canadian copy of any of these Sammy Hagar Capitol albums. This is Street Machine from '79, and as you can see, it's got the lines on there, like one of your Beatles cassettes. That's something Capitol did, and by now they're using the more familiar logo with the crown or whatever. That's the cassette itself. Eventually, the cassettes would be black in color. We've got another Hagar one here. Around, I guess, 81, 82, they'd started putting the Capitol cassettes in Canada that looked like this, that had the black with the yellow writing on the side, this very familiar font. This is Live 1980, and again, rare to find. Not the easiest thing to find in the U.S., but even more rare to find a Canadian version of it. I got another one that looks just like it. Helix, No Rest for the Wicked. This is their first major label album. It's actually the 3rd album overall. And where the CBS cassettes had the chromium dioxide and the PolyGram cassettes had the QC10, Capitol's was called Super Dynamic Range, and they'd have it along the bottom here. Like, if you collect Beatles cassettes and Pink Floyd from all over the world, you'll see Canadian ones that look very much like this. Oh, yeah, you got a Amagama. Yeah. So that's the cassette itself. And I only got one more, just one more Capitol one here. Is again April Wine. This is Power Play. This is actually a reissue because the first issue would have just been like black with white lettering. So around 1984 is when you see the cassettes that look like this. Sometimes they're yellow here instead of white, but they have this very familiar look to it. This is Power Play, which originally came out in 82. And there's the cassette itself, and it looks like there's something inside the J card, but all it is about this dynamic noise reduction XDR thing exclusive to Capitol cassettes. There's absolutely no information about the actual album in it. So, yeah, that's my Capitol EMI cassettes.
All right.
So next up, let's do. Have you got anything from A&M?
I do. This is the Police. Their first album, Outlandos D'Amore.
I've got many a Y&T cassette that look just like that.
The thing I hate about A&M is the J cards are perforated,
Yeah.
so they're not sturdy, and they just, they're easy to damage and easy to, stick the cassette in and you accidentally flatten,
Yeah.
the other side of the J card.
The CBS ones are like that too. The old ones are perforated, but they don't show up as much as the A&M because it's all white. But the A&M ones, yeah, they're just kind of cheap looking.
Yeah, and then this is a band
Squeeze, yeah.
Argy Bargy.
Very unique. I will say this, like the A&M cassettes, you don't mistake them for any other label.
Yeah, no, they stand out for sure. And this has just got minimal credits here.
Yeah, all exactly the same, no matter who it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the only A&M stuff I've got.
This is just like that. This is Y&T Earthshaker, their first album for A&M. This is from '81. Looks just like it on the side, on the back. That's the cassette itself, and yeah, there's actually a little bit of credits inside of it, but not much. And it's one of those useless J cards that doesn't need to be. Folds out into nothingness. So in Canada, you'll see that the A&M cassettes look way different because the very next Y&T album is Black Tiger. This is a Canadian cassette. And A&M did this annoying thing in '82 and '83 where they didn't put the name of the album on the side. So there's no album that's just called Y&T. But you can't, you have to look at the front. And so that's the back. And there's the cassette itself. This is actually, this is quite rare to find this Canadian version of Black Tiger. I have never, in all my travels, and I've looked for a lot of Y&T stuff, I've never seen a Canadian Earthshaker tape. I have to assume it came out, but I've never seen one. Does it look like this? I have no idea. More likely, if it did exist, it looks like this. This is the second Bryan Adams album, You Want It, You Got It. And this is an old Canadian issue on A&M. Looks like this on the side and on the back. So, and again, I've got another example of like the Y&T album that didn't list the album title. So when I bought this, I thought, okay, cool, this is his first album. I didn't have it at the time, but it's not. It's Cuts Like a Knife. So yeah, it is kind of annoying when you don't put the album title on it. This actually got no credit side of it. But then they started putting out these really distinctive looking ones from, I would say, '83 on for the next few years that looked like this. This is 38 Special Tour de Force. And A&M is also the only record label I've ever heard tell of that named the kind of cassettes that they use, these BASF cassettes. They'd always have that emblazoned on them, which I always found kind of funny, actually. And that's what the cassette itself looked like. And the last A&M one I've got is a really old, it's a reissue, but it's quite old. It's Nazareth, Close Enough for Rock and Roll, originally from '76. I don't know what the original '76 one would have looked like, but chances are it probably would have had a similar J card, but the cassette would have been with a sticker on it, or it would have been like a cream-colored cassette or something. So that's all my A&M ones.
I do have one more to show, Tim, and I think this is actually a Canadian cassette. And this is a extended play single. This is The Police again.
Yeah.
And this is the Don't Stand So Close to Me, the
'86. Yeah, that's definitely Canadian. I've got a Bryan Adams one that looks a lot like that, except that instead of red on the side, it's blue, and it's that song Diana that he had that was from the Reckless Sessions.
Okay.
Yeah, before there were cassette singles, you would see like little anomalies like that. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's funny. I was talking with my wife about that. She's a huge Sting fan. We're actually going to see him in September. Knock on wood. And I said, I actually like that '86 remix because I remember seeing the video to it back when I was first watching videos. So I have a nostalgia for it. I know a lot of people really don't like it, but I kind of like it. I like the fact that they've got two completely different versions of the same song.
Yeah, no, they do. And they recorded an '86 version of the do 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 da 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 that never saw release, but it's kind of
they almost killed each other just getting that one single done. So And I
Yeah,
know
well, the
Copeland
reason it's
hated the drum sound on that, and it does sound really different for them. But
yeah, well, the only reason they did that is because Stuart Copeland actually fell off a horse and broke his arm, and so he couldn't drum. So they convened in the studio to record the follow up to Synchronicity, and Stuart Copeland's like, "Well, I can't drum," and they're like, "Well, what are we gonna do?" And so they just ended up reworking two of their classic songs from
Yeah.
Zenyatta Mandata and putting a drum machine on it. But yeah, I like the fact that it's different, and I don't know that I like it more than the original version, but I think it's cool to have that kind of updated
And
sound
it's
to it.
it's not even like, say, the two versions of Whitesnake's "Here I Go Again" that completely changed the arrangement. Like the '86 version is it's slower, it's more melancholy. I like Andy Summers' guitar line through it, and it's just
Mhm.
interesting because it really was the end of an era because it's the last new bit of music they ever came out with as far as a new recording.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what have we got up for another label here?
How about Atlantic?
Perfect. Yep.
All right. Um, so I have here, I've got three versions of Led Zeppelin 2 that I'm going to show. This is the first one.
Wow. I've never seen one like that. I wonder if
Yeah,
that's
either did I.
I wonder if that's an RCA Music Service version. No,
Yeah,
it doesn't. Yeah, I think it might be because it's got on the. I think it's got on the. You'll see right over top of the Atlantic logo. It's got that C103. I think that marks it as an RCA Music Service card. So I think
okay.
that's why that looks so different. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you get bands like the Beatles and Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. I mean, their albums would have been issued countless times, right? So you could do an entire collection of some of these albums and have 50 different cassette versions from all over the world, all looking different in some way.
Right. This is the next one, which should look familiar to more
Yeah,
people, at least
that's the one I
over in the
have.
States.
Yeah, I have one that looks like that. Yeah, that's a pretty
And so
common.
yeah, I've got two that look just like this. The color is a little bit more washed out on this one, but the spines, for the most part, I mean, the spines are identical. However, on this one, which is, I think, like an 80s reissue, the track looks like that. And then
Okay,
they're
yeah,
horizontal
yeah,
on
yeah. I
here.
think you're right. That first one you showed is the newer of the two.
Yeah. And then I've got some AC/DC here. And this is Power Age or Power Age, however you
Yeah,
want to pronounce it.
yeah.
And just the cassette there. And then this is Let There Be Rock, which now you've got the tracks listed down there.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then I'm going to lump this in just because they're AC/DC, but I've got, these are
Oh,
Australian
yes, I
import.
remember you telling me when you got these. That's very just on Albert Productions or whatever you call that label.
Right. And
Yeah,
there's
that's very
somebody,
cool.
there's a record bar
Bar.
sticker on the back there. And then the cassette itself.
Yeah, that's very cool. And of
So
course,
I've
Let
got,
There Be Rock. Not only does it have a different cover, but it's also got Crapsody in Blue on it. I can't remember what song. Maybe it was Problem Child that they left off, or that's not on that version. But I'm
yeah,
so glad that AC/DC put that Backtracks box set that just collects all of those, so you don't have to buy all the Australian versions.
right. Well, because they're super expensive. I saw one in
Yeah,
the record store last year. It was over $200
yeah,
to get the import of it. And then this is TNT.
cool. That's the only one I have. I have the CD of that. That's the only one of those old albums I bothered getting because it's the only one that doesn't have like a North American counterpart with that name. It's essentially
Right.
what we know as High Voltage.
And then look how narrow that window is.
Oh yeah, it barely. Yeah.
This is
Although
a sticker.
I will say something about having that narrow window. It would protect the tape from the elements because that was very thin film of plastic covering it.
Sure. So then after, I think in the early 80s, this is the Jailbreak 74, and it's got a different spine.
That's a
There.
Columbia House is what you got there.
And then the flick of the switch is actually, it's got the white on the spine. It's kind of got the classic black label, but
I think that's in keeping with the album art on that one.
right.
And what a great overlooked album too.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of their,
like
I think
that
it's
album.
their best album of the 80s, but
yeah.
So that's AC/DC, and then this is actually High Voltage.
Yeah.
Which is actually Atco.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because they were on Atco, and then they were on the main Atlantic label, and then on the Razor's Edge, they went back to Atco.
Yeah.
It's all the same, like again, capital EMI. It's all basically the same company.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Atco, this is NXS.
Yes, I have that very one. Yeah. Yeah. Just got that on CD not long ago too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've not been able to find that one yet. And I've seen two versions of this. This is Genesis, their self-titled album. One has black. It was almost like that transition. One has the black with Genesis and white, and then this is the one with the white and the blue. But for all intents and purposes, the only thing that's different is the spine there. Everything else is
the black with the white lettering almost sounds like it's a Canadian cassette, but they also did it in the States too.
Yeah, so it looked like that one.
Yeah.
But so
again, that's an album that would have been issued many times.
Right. Yeah, as popular as it was. So yeah, that's my Atlantic.
So another one, I got another one here to show you that'll look familiar. Led Zeppelin Presence, you sent me this. This is a U.S. Columbia House cassette, and in the early 80s, they all looked like this, and man, what an ugly design.
Yeah, I've got those ones.
So I've got a, what else do I have? I got a couple of April Wine ones that look like this. Yeah, just very, very bland, generic looking, but cool to have to see what these different ones, looked like. The cassette didn't look that different, with the Swan Song logo on it, but yeah, very, very, very generic looking. It got to the point where the Columbia House cassettes didn't look all that different, except if you looked in the very fine print, they'd have a different letter, a slightly different lettering for the serial number, and then it would say like manufactured by Columbia House under license. So here's another. This is a Canadian cassette. Robert Plant, The Principle of Moments. This is a very popular cassette style from the 80s. They would all have this super cassette here. So the Joes is not just a cassette, it's a super cassette. They're supposed to sound so good, right? I'll take it out of the, getting the glare. Look like that on the side. And in 1983 and 1984, anything that came out in Canada that was distributed by Warner Music or WEA Music looked like this, had the song titles on the top like that, and it had some sort of picture. Usually it was a picture of the band or the artist in the middle here. I've got lots that look like that. Like Van Halen 1984 is one of the more popular. 4 photos of the band here, and anything that was used on the album, they'd put it here. A little bit of credits inside here. And of course, more about how super these super cassettes are. So that was a very, I could have dug a lot of them out there. And the reason I dug this one out is because it's a little bit older, because most of the cassettes were black. This was obviously an early one where it's a beige color. Now I've got some really old Atlantic ones from Canada. Yes, Close to the Edge. It's a one with a sticker on it, which is a pretty good indication you're dealing with a pretty old issue.
It takes up the entire cover too.
Yeah, looked up.
It's odd.
So it looks like on the side. And another yes one.
Okay, there's actually, I'm sorry, there's actual song titles.
It's all green, but yeah, it does have the song titles on. And oddly enough, it's like Program 1 and Program 2, not Side 1 and Side 2. Here's one that I'm pretty sure is from the year it came out. Probably my favorite Yes album, Drama. So it's got the typewritten, again, it's got the typewritten font here. Some customization, because it's got the Yes logo on it. And it actually says, They give Roger Dean, cover painting Roger Dean, 1980. And this also this has got to be getting to the end of when they were using the stickers. So I've actually never seen a reissued version of Drama because for some reason it wasn't a big seller, even though it's a fabulous, fabulous album. The next two I'll show as a pair. They're very similar. The first two, Foreigner and Double Vision. Very colorful on the sides. That's what they look like there and there. Now, seems to me, okay, so this one's completely worn off. I'm assuming somebody, I don't know what they did, but it would have had the printing on it. And I believe the first one, the first one's a sticker, much like that Yes one. A couple more. First Bad Company. This is a pretty old issue. And although probably not as old because it is a black cassette. And the last one is an oddity because it's the only one that this band, the only one you'll find of this band on Atlantic. This is April Wine's Stand Back. Now, this originally came out on a label in the States called Big Tree Records, which eventually was distributed by Atlantic. Stand Back was actually a really big album for April Wine in Canada, but in the US, not so much. But I'm thinking from the look of this, that in the early 80s when Harder, Faster, Nature of the Beast were big albums, I think that Atlantic got smart and said, you know what, why don't we reissue this album that did really well for them in Canada? I've never seen a vinyl of it. I know there is, but it didn't make it a CD. It would have been cool to have an April Wine CD on Atlantic, but it looks kind of like those old AC/DC ones a little bit. But yeah, that's the only one you're going to find of Stand Back or of April Wine that's on Atlantic Records. That's all my Atlantic cassettes they had out.
Okay.
Why don't we stick with the general Warner, so do Warner Brothers next, maybe.
Okay. So this is Van Halen's first album.
Yep. Very, very common look.
Yeah. And then like most Warner, you got the big 1 and 2.
Yep.
With the track listing there. This is Dire Straits Communique.
Which is, people may or may not know, Jeff and I have talked about it. You get that in Canada. It's not on Warner Brothers. It's on PolyGram.
Yeah, interesting difference there. And another band that you don't associate really with Warner Brothers, but the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
This is their MIU album.
Yeah, because their brother records label was distributed by Warner Brothers. Then I think it was distributed by CBS. But eventually, I think probably all of those got reissued by Capitol.
Yeah. This one, I guess I should have brought it out with the Atlantic cassettes that I had. It's actually, it says Swan Song, but it is Atlantic Records. It's got the custom spine there.
What's interesting about that is that I didn't get it out, but I have a Canadian cassette of that. And for that one, they just, I don't know if they got lazy, but they basically took the US J card and just stamped the Canadian address for Warner Music on the back of it. And the cassette looks different, but the J card's just about identical.
Okay. And then I've got a couple Alice Cooper here. This is Flush the Fashion.
That's the same as mine. Yeah. Yours is in better shape. It's not easy to find that one, but the one that's really hard to find is Special Forces.
Yeah. I've yet to see that one. But the other one that I have is, I think, a pretty rare one, Dada.
Yeah, it would be.
So it doesn't have the big 1 and 2, doesn't have the song titles in there.
Got a bit of credits.
Yeah.
But to give you an example of like, so my Dada is a Canadian one, and so it looks like this. But you know that the old picture of Alice that's on the back of that, of Dada, mm-hmm. That's what's in this space.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So they just take whatever.
Right. So that's my Warner Brothers.
Okay. Well, I've got some of the same artists you talked about. This is a really old Women and Children First Canadian one. Looks like that on the side and on the back. And then you know, there's a lot of them, this WEA on here. So there's a WEA, Warner, Elektra, Atlantic. So anything that fell under that banner. As a matter of fact, it's kind of funny. I mean, if anybody's a U2 fan, Island Records used to be distributed by Atlantic. So I think the first 3 U2 albums you can buy that look like Warner cassettes. I got a couple of Alice Cooper. This is a really old $1 Billion Babies.
Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go.
And it's got the Island logo there.
And it's even using the Atlantic numbering system, which is kind of neat. So this is an old $1 Billion Babies that I found. Again, it's got the typewritten font on it. Very plain looking on the side, on the back. And I think this is a sticker. Yeah, it's got a white sticker on it. And another one, not quite as common, Lace and Whiskey. This is an old Canadian version of that. And they like their yellow stickers. A lot of these labels did. And the only other one I've got is 24 Karat Purple, which this is that weird compilation that came out on Warner Brothers in Canada, but I've never seen an American version of it, which is weird because usually if it doesn't come out in the States, it didn't come out in Canada either. But I've got, you know, the record, 8-track, and cassette of this, all from Canada. Of course, it's got the Purple Records logo on it too. And of course, the other part of that equation would be Elektra Records. Have you got any Elektra Records cassettes?
I do. So I've got, these are the first 2 Dokken albums.
Yeah.
And that's what the cassette looks like. And then they just have credits on the J card. And then this is Tooth and Nail, which
looks totally different than the record or the CD.
Yeah, and on this one, they've got the updated Elektra Records.
Yep, that's right. That happened, and that's cool to have that because you can kind of tell when it happened.
Right. And this is actually, this one has got a band photo.
Picture, yeah.
And it's got lyrics.
Yeah.
In it as well. This is the Cars. Their debut. Nothing on the inside of the J card, but that's what that cassette looks like. And then I got a couple of Doors. This is the Doors' first album.
Interesting that the cover takes up the whole front.
Yeah, all the Doors cassettes do that. The only one that doesn't, which I have here, is LA Woman, although there is a version where just this photograph takes up the entire cover of the J card. And that spine looks like that. And then this is Alive She Cried, which is kind of a live EP that they released in the 80s. It's got the custom logo on the spine there.
It's got the newer Elektra logo on it too. Yeah, that's on 8. You can get that on 8-track.
Okay.
Not easily, but it exists.
Right. Yeah, you're gonna do a second volume of Unspooled and just have it be
you know what? I've probably updated about a couple of dozen that I've found since then. Maybe. Yeah. And maybe. It's just we'll leave it at that.
All right, that's my Elektra collection.
So I've got a couple Queen ones to talk about. This is a really old Sheer Heart Attack from Canada. This one, actually, the case is worth talking about too, but I'll start with the J card. So as you can tell, very, very old issue on the side. But the cassette itself has the sticker on it that says manufactured and distributed by WEA Music of Canada. So that's not something I see all the time. And again, we've got a yellow sticker cassette. The next one I have is a US one, and it looks a lot more like some of your Doors ones and your Cars one. So it tells me it was issued around the same time. This is a US version of A Night at the Opera. It's hard to find these old Queen cassettes that aren't the Hollywood reissues. And that's what the cassette itself looks like. And there's a little bit of credits here, and there's just a little bit more credits here. And that's all I've got from Elektra. Like the rest of the cassettes I've got some MCA, and then I've got some just various ones. So whatever you want to show next, go ahead and I'll.
Yeah, I've got one artist on MCA, and all these cassettes look different in their own way. I'll start with what I think is the oldest that I've got. This is The Who, and this is Odds and Sods, which is kind of a B-sides, alternate tracks, kind of leftovers sort of compilation. It's got a sticker on it there. And the J, this is another one of those really thick J cards. It's like twice the thickness of regular ones, but it's just got other albums,
Other Who cassettes
from the Who. This is the Who by numbers.
Yeah.
And this has also got a sticker on it.
Yeah.
And also the other great Who cassettes. And this is Quadrophenia. Now the spine looks different. This has got Track Records.
That was their label, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And nothing there in the J card at all. And then you got the ones, this is probably the most common MCA.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And they mess with the track listing on this one too, which I hate. They've got Getting In 2 and it's track 3 on side 1 instead of starting off side 1. And you've got Going Mobile as the first track on side 2, which is actually the second track. So they messed with that one. And then this technically, I guess, would have fallen under Warner Brothers. I had it with my other Who CDs, but I like this one because the cover is different than the regular album. This is Face Dances.
Yes, that's right. They had 2 albums on Warner Brothers in the early 80s. Yeah.
Yeah, this and It's Hard, which was the follow-up album. But
I don't think those existed very long on Warner Brothers before they were reissued by MCA. So that's cool. I like that when you have those weird ones, like that Night Ranger one. It's like, what is that doing on CBS Records?
Right. Yeah. All right, that's my MCA.
So I'm going to show mine off all at once because they all look the same, and they're all the very familiar MCA blue. So I've got top is Lynyrd Skynyrd Street Survivors, then Night Ranger Dawn Patrol, which is the MCA reissue, because it originally would have come out on Boardwalk Records, and then a kind of a rare one, the Joe Perry Project, Once a Rocker, Always a Rocker, kind of looking the same on the front. And the Canadian cassettes tended to be blue, too. They didn't look all that different. So now I've
issue Street Survivors with the flame cover.
I would think that I've got the 8-track version of that, pretty beat up. I would imagine it did when it first came out, but I've never seen one. Usually it's the non-flames cover. Now, all I've got left, Jeff, I've got like 8 cassettes that are all on different ones. So what else have you got?
So I'll just show you. I've got just some on different labels. This is actually this is the John Lennon collection, but it's Korean.
Okay, what label is it actually on?
I could not tell you, to be honest. But this is what's funny. So it's got like the titles in English. There's a lot in Korean, but the song titles are still, it says it's on the, I can't even read that. It's so small. My eyes are not what they used to be.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know. What does that say?
Yeah, I can't even, just looks like a bunch of letters.
Yeah.
A bunch of rounded letters. They had to have, if it's a legit cassette, they had to have licensed it from somebody. Probably EMI.
And then you don't see many of these, but 2 budget labels, the Phoenix and Pickwick label. This is Pickwick.
Yeah.
Pickwick cassette. Which, quite certain the sound quality on these is terrible, but this is the Phoenix.
Probably the only reason they were able to issue them without getting sued.
Yeah.
Yeah. Much like, how many times have we seen that old Alice Cooper performance from 1969 bootleg. I mean, it's awful to listen to. And then they'll stick like a constrictor or a photo on the cassette to make you think it's something different.
Yeah, they keep recycling it.
Yeah.
This is actually a Yugoslavia cassette,
Cool.
which I love because unlike over here in the States, they
With the
actually
Beatles.
they preserve the track listing,
Okay.
which in the American version, it's all, chopped up and haphazard, and they keep the original liner notes right down to the font. I mean, if you're familiar with this CD, I mean, this is what it looks like. It's got the liner notes that were on the back of the album jacket here, which were reprinted. And so I've got a couple of these Yugoslavia cassettes just because they're more faithful to the actual album packaging.
They're very well done.
Yeah, they really are. I was really very impressed. I've got, what else do I got here? This is another Let It Be. It's on the that Music for Pleasure.
That so you see how the titles are down the side of the back of the J card.
Yeah.
I've seen Queen ones that look like that too, that have the
Okay.
the song titles like that.
I've got a couple of Arista.
Crocus, yeah.
Yeah.
That the red that is so unhard rock looking, that whole label. Like, it might look fine for Whitney Houston and the Ghostbusters soundtrack, but not for
Monkeys.
not for Crocus. Yeah.
And then that's they're
The Arista cassettes got off a little bit better in Canada. They looked a little different. It wasn't all red all the time.
right.
Now,
This
for the
one,
Crocus one, the red actually looked really good for One Vice at a Time, because that album cover's pretty much all red anyway.
yeah. Otherwise, it just looks a little too.
Looks out of place.
Yeah. This is on the Sire Records label. This is an early. This is the Pretenders too.
Okay. Now, would that have been like when Sire was distributed by Warner Brothers, or was it before that? That's got some foreign writing on there.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure, but I gotta imagine it's before Warner Brothers took over the distribution.
Yeah, that looks like it might be from Mexico or somewhere.
And you've got the track listings there.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty much anything else that I have.
Okay, cool. So I've got a bunch of the same bands, but different labels, just because. So very much like AC/DC, as far as in their home country and then the world, Triumph, when they first started, their first two albums only came out in Canada. First one was self-titled. This is another very rare cassette. Second one was called Rock and Roll Machine, but it's not like what most people would picture the Rock and Roll Machine album to look like. So again, when they signed to RCA in the US, they reissued an album in '78 called Rock and Roll Machine, which is a compilation of these two. So you were missing half an album until all of the reissues happened. So these were on a fairly well-known Canadian independent label called Attic Records. And sometimes you'll see it where the color is filled in. Other times it's just the outline. And again, we've got the stickers on here like this. And whereas the Rock and Roll Machine one looks like that. But the funny thing about Triumph is that and then they got MCA distributed all of their albums. So it's funny to me when I found this, which is Never Surrender. It's the last album they did for RCA in the US. So it's strange to me to see an RCA cassette with Triumph on it. And this one actually has credits and lyrics, so it's pretty cool, actually. Back to April Wine. Of course, the label they were on in Canada for most of their career was another Canadian independent label called Aquarius Records. This is one of the oldest cassettes I have. This is their second album on record, and they were distributed, Aquarius at the time was distributed by London Records, which might explain this blue case. This is a very old cassette and very unique for a lot of reasons. This is what it looks like. Again, the cassette itself is blue. It's actually got credits inside of it.
Some of those early April Wine covers are like the worst
Oh, they're terrible. The
covers
very
I've
first album
ever
is I think,
seen.
the worst with the feet on it. And this actually has a little booklet in it showing other albums available on London Records. So that's one of the rare ones. I've done a whole episode of my April Wine cassettes because I collect all their variants because there's so many different ones in Canada alone. This is another album of theirs, Live at the El Macambo. This actually came out in the US on London Records, but I've never seen a cassette of it. I've only ever seen an 8-track and a record, believe it or not. This is an early Aquarius issue. I'm not sure if it was distributed by Capitol at this point or not, but eventually they started to look more streamlined. And the last one is another big Canadian independent label. I don't know why so many of these started with A, but I'm talking about A&M Records. Of course, their most famous client was Rush. In Canada, the first Rush album, all the way through All the World's a Stage, initially came out on Mercury, just like they did around the world. But then in '77, A&M Records was formed with their management, and it's very hard to find anything in Canada now that's on Mercury. So I've got a few things, but I don't have any cassettes. This is a really old, well, never mind that the case, because that's a newer case, but this is a really old Fly By Night. And you can kind of tell by the way that the printing is on it. This is an old Columbia House issue of Fly By Night. The cassette's way different. The cassette is a newer issue, but again, like that unmasked one, the cassette fell apart. Then I've got Hemispheres. This is a U.S. Columbia or a Canadian Columbia House issue on Anthem. Customization as far as the logo goes. And the last one I have is another Max Webster. This is their live album, Live Magnetic Air. Again, it's that typewritten font. So this is an old issue, and it's got some customization on here. So that's a really good look at some obscure cassette tapes. And if you're watching this, if you comment on my Facebook feed here, if you've got some really cool cassettes, let's see pictures of them. I'd love to see what people out there have. So Jeff, thank you very much for sitting in for this one. This was a lot of fun going through these old cassettes. And in some cases, these are really rare albums. In some cases, they're not. They're pretty common albums, and you've seen them on cassette a lot, but maybe not these versions because they're some of the earliest issues. So again, remember to follow Jeff on YouTube, Jeff Whitcher Vinyl Destination. What have you got coming up, Jeff?
Don't know.
That's the fun part.
Fly by the seat of my pants, Tim. Whatever. I
got to tell you, I've really been enjoying your album covers series. And when you did the Orleans one, I just about spit out my coffee. You're a braver.
There'll be a few more of those. I've been getting.
You're a braver man than I. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, I've got an album series that's called Let's
Shit on these album covers. Yeah. And
so
some of them are pretty bad. And I knew you were going to talk about the Orleans one because it's. And here's the sad thing about it: it doesn't look all that different from that the first Montrose album. That first Montrose album is incredible. But the album cover, I wouldn't look at that in 1973 and think this thing's got a rock.
Well, it reminded me a little bit of Shabu Shabab, the inside photograph.
Yeah. Oh, well. So, yes. So, Jeff Whitcher Vinyl Destination. Don't forget, folks, Unspooled and Adventure in 8-track still available. $65 Canadian shipped. Message me. We'll get the book to you. And thanks, everyone, for watching Tim's Vinyl Confessions.